All right. Well, welcome to Fellows on Fellows, Thoughts and Experiences from a Fulbright and an Erskine Fellow. It took me a long time to come up with Fellows on Fellows, but Fellows on Fellowships. But anyway, very glad to have Dr. Stefan Frisch from the Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders and Dr. Dave Williams from the Department of Nutrition and Healthcare Management to share their great experiences with us. And we're going to hand it over to you first, Stefan.
Okay, thank you. I will fire up PowerPoint and try sharing my screen and seeing if that works. Nope, not that one. This one. Okay. How's that look? Okay, got it. Yeah, so this is the University of Canterbury PowerPoint template and a little picture of arrival at the airport in Auckland, where they have this lovely wood carving with the native Maori style there. So I was on what's called a Visiting Erskine Fellowship. That is very specific to the University of Canterbury in Christchurch, New Zealand, which from these various graphics I stole off of the internet, you can see is quite a long way from just about anywhere. My flight was Charlotte to Houston, 15 hours to Auckland, and then a little hop down to Christchurch on the South Island. One of the fun things about New Zealand is that there is an indigenous Pacific culture related to Samoa and Hawaii and Easter Island and all of that from population spread a long time ago in big canoes that they went across the Pacific Ocean on, which is crazy to think about. So all meetings like this that you would have there, they would start with a traditional formal Maori greeting like Kia ora tātou tēnā koutou, which basically is hello everyone and greetings to you all. The Erskine program exists basically because of one person, a guy named Jack Erskine, who almost made it to 90 years old, who lived in New Zealand, and after he got out of school around the world a little bit, he got both his bachelor's and master's at the University of Canterbury. He spent a little time in Europe, and he was a research collaborator with Ernest Rutherford, who won a Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 1908, related to, I think, radiation, but Rutherford is also known for a lot of research on iron and its magnetic properties. Jack Erskine worked as an electrical engineer in the United States and in Australia in the early 1900s, you know, sort of Depression era and roaring 20s and whatnot. But apparently lived an extremely frugal life and also invested the money he did make well, such that as part of his will in 1960, he bequeathed this pile of money to the university that they created an endowment for, in which the university has invested, and it has grown to the point that it funds this Erskine program. There is a Jack Erskine building where I taught my class while I was there in honor of this fellow as well. So the Erskine program supports teaching for folks like us that come to the University of Canterbury for one of their existing programs. The funding provides air travel as well as for one immediate family member if somebody wants to come along with you for a good part of the trip. They give you a place to live and a daily allowance for living expenses. This program also funds faculty at University of Canterbury to go to other places, usually more for research, to enhance their scholarly activities on the basis of funding from this program. So my pictures included my nice Air New Zealand welcome aboard screen for my seat that I stared at for 15 hours, In the lower right is the little house they put me and my mom in. It was actually nice. It was kind of set back from the road and fenced. So it was very quiet back there. Had a nice private little spot. And so I don't forget to mention it later. One other thing to know about New Zealand is coffee. Coffee is everywhere. When they say coffee, they mean espresso. You get coffee at a gas station, they hand make it at a machine in the gas station. I mean, it's just ridiculous how much they like their coffee. There's a spot on campus where if you do a little 360 turn, there are 3 different campus espresso coffee shops you can see from one particular point. So, and I'm a big fan of coffee, so it was nice bit of the program. I guess that was an image meant to reflect the daily living allowance, which includes paying for coffee. So New Zealand as a country has 2 pieces, the North Island and the South Island. They have a wide variety of geography, so I stole some random internet images to kind of reflect penguins in the very south. It's one of the closer places to Antarctica you can be. In fact, Christchurch is one of the 5 airports that you can fly to Antarctica from. Of course, if you have a reason to and an invitation from the government. The US does maintain their Antarctic station from Christchurch. That's their connection point there. They have whales and dolphins out in the sea, and let's see, there's a kiwi way up north, and all kinds of other boating and natural things going on. Threw in a volcano map of New Zealand just to, again, indicate how it's kind of interesting. Some of those are still somewhat active. Most of them, I think, are no longer active. So right next to where I was in Christchurch down here was Akaroa. It's about a half sunk volcano, but it made for a very nice place to go look around and enjoy the scenery. And then why not? They grow a lot of wine in New Zealand, various places. So as you can see, there are several major wine regions in New Zealand. And I'll finish the presentation with, COVID and the coronavirus, but obviously drinking wine was one of the things to do while in stay at home. Okay, so these are all pictures I took personally with the phone camera that I had. So I didn't even get a fancy, nice camera. So there are some lovely waterfalls. This was a bay in that Akaroa area I just mentioned. In the bottom middle here is a thing called a braided river. So it's like basically a giant sand and gravel plain that has just little sort of rivulets running through it of water. New Zealand apparently has about 60% of the world's braided rivers. So if you're into geology and whatnot, and you like braided rivers, I guess New Zealand is the place to go. And of course, mountains, especially on the west side of the South Island where I was. So like in the bottom right here is just kind of a random shot from the highway of the Canterbury Plain, very flat, arid region east of the mountains, because all the rainfall falls on the other side as the clouds come over, and the mountains in the distance, which you could even see from campus, actually. I think I snuck in a shot of that somewhere. Anyway, stunningly, gorgeously pretty scenery all over the place, which I'm sure, if the world ever gets normal and I can do something like host a conference here around this time of year, a lot of people coming from other places would think, our fall color is spectacular, would love the scenery just as much. So New Zealand is a British Commonwealth nation. So it used to be part of the British Empire, but now it's a separate entity with sort of a novel allegiance to the United Kingdom and the Queen. There was a treaty in 1840 establishing collaboration between colonists and the native Maori people. I think this was a friendlier than many colonization situation. It was kind of near the tail end of the British Empire. If you sort of sit and look at a map of the UK and go through the Mediterranean past Egypt, and then you run into India and Pakistan, and then you run into Australia, and then you run into New Zealand. So it's kind of the last place they got to before they stopped doing that sort of thing. They have a parliamentary government with a prime minister. It's written into their constitution that some seats in parliament are guaranteed to people of Maori heritage to make sure they have some representation. There are 3 official languages: English, the Maori language, which is called Te Reo Maori, and a New Zealand Sign Language. And I think I threw in this picture of a fountain just to sort of represent the, the Britishness you see in a lot of the architecture. And this was in the city botanical gardens in the center of the city. A lot of plants and trees and things in that, also kind of very much in the British garden style. So it is historically British, as represented here by things like good dark beer. Lower left is a standard roast dinner you would have on Sunday with meat and potatoes and Yorkshire pudding, which is this puffy baked thing with a little sauce on top and a few veggies, not completely unhealthy. We also have your classic British breakfast with an egg and sausage and bacon-ish stuff, a tomato, baked beans of all things. I can't see mushrooms too well, but there's usually whole mushrooms in there as well. I'm a tennis player. I did get to play on grass tennis courts when I was there, which is kind of cool. I had never done that before in my life. In part because of COVID eliminating a lot of touristing opportunities, went a little nuts at the very end there and rented a car. So I drove on the left side of the road. I went through roundabouts that go backwards from how things work for us. So that was its own little adventure. Before lockdown happened, I went and saw a polo match in this thing they have called the Urban Polo League. It's a smaller team than a regular polo team. They play rock music while the guys are riding around with their horses. But it was pretty amazing to see. If you've watched professional tennis at all recently, the players are now so athletic that they like run and slide on the courts. Same thing with the riders and their horses. So to see horses sliding on grass as they make turns was pretty darn impressive. Let's see. Starbucks is there, of course. I got myself a souvenir New Zealand Starbucks mug because it's got a kiwi on it. And then I stuck this caution sign up. There's another one in there similarly. When you go out and about, it's different from the US. Like, there are a lot of trails that look pretty hazardous. If you actually see a sign that says be careful, like, you could probably kill yourself if you're not careful. They mostly just kind of let you do your own thing. So if they do warn you that something is dangerous, you better take that seriously. They are kind of distinct, though, very outdoorsy and friendly, I think, compared to the British. It was a lot like Boone in a lot of ways. People really like to spend a lot of time outside. Friendly people. So at one point, as we were driving around, somebody had made a handmade sign helping people find where a bathroom was that was down at the bottom of the hill that I thought was kind of cute. Native art, like Boone, a lot of dogs riding around in cars and running next to people that are on bicycles and that sort of thing. They like their kiwis, of course. So I did not see any kiwis in the wild. I had booked a tour to try and see kiwis in the wild, but that was going to happen. And then the coronavirus thing happened, so we didn't end up getting to do that. Did put another danger sign here. What you can't see, because it's kind of cropped out, is a weapons emplacement that was put in for World War II in case of Japanese ships trying to do something to the harbor in the area of Christchurch. So they had this kind of pillbox bunker thing there that had a gun in it. It has a flat roof that you could pretty easily climb onto. They don't put a big fence there to make sure you don't. They just put up a sign that says, hey, don't climb on the top of this thing. That can be dangerous. Easter happened when I was there. They have chocolate kiwis that you can get if you don't want chocolate rabbits, which I thought was cool. And I like zoos, so we went to the zoo and they had the Carolina wood duck on display as an exotic creature in the zoo, which is always fun to do when you go to other countries. Went to the zoo in Berlin and saw a North American raccoon on display, which I thought was hilarious. So all right, get a little serious here. The Erskine Fellowship, applying is kind of easy. Because somebody there applies for you to come and teach in their department. So they deal with most of the paperwork. They just ask you to supply them with, an appropriate amount of information to demonstrate the criterion. Academics who are distinguished in their field being approved for a visiting Erskine Fellowship. They have built up this endowment to the point where they can award about 70 Erskines per year, so 35 per term semester, roughly. How long people stay really varies quite a bit. Some people go for, maybe 4 weeks and teach kind of a condensed course or part of a class. I went for a full semester, kind of because I worked it out so that I could. We had like a reception at the beginning of all the fellows and their families. And, I ran into various people around campus at various times and got the impression that what exactly you had to do for your teaching varied a lot. So I was a guest in the linguistics department, not a really big program. I got to teach like a language sound phonology sort of seminar to about 10 students. There was a guy there in geology, I think, maybe geography. Anyway, there, because New Zealand's got all that interesting terrain. He had a big lecture of like 180 students that he was teaching, so he had a bit more of a teaching hassle than I did. I did get the picture though that for the most part, when they bring Erskines in, they expect you to be kind of a part-time teacher and a part-time enjoyer of New Zealand. It's not really officially a cultural exchange like the Fulbright is. But they don't really realistically think people are going to be spending all their time at the university, such that folks were impressed when I was, willing to give a couple of guest lectures in other classes when I went and attended research colloquia given by other people. I did a colloquium myself. I would assume most people would. That at least, goes on your own CV, so it makes you look better to your home institution. But the folks in my department seemed very impressed by my dedication to, actually teaching and being around and attending department events and that sort of thing. So it seemed like I walked a fairly good line because I felt like I saw a decent amount of New Zealand. Practicalities, airfare and accommodations were arranged for me before I left. If you have a family member coming with you that's going to stay for at least half the time you're there, they will buy that person a plane ticket as well. So my mom had been squirreling away money to pay for a plane ticket, and then we found out she was going to get one for free. So we spent that money on things in New Zealand instead. Talking to other Erskines, having family definitely had an effect on where you were housed. So single academics that were going there got put like in an apartment building, whereas I got a nice house with a yard and a little more space. It ended up being a 3-bedroom house, so we had enough room for visitors to come and visit, which of course would have happened except for once again COVID. Do have to put up a little money up front to pay for some stuff before you get there. Your living expenses goes into a New Zealand bank account that you open, as soon as you can after you arrive, basically. They did mine once everything was set up, probably a couple of weeks after I was there, just as one big lump sum of money that I then had to do whatever with. And for the folks that did not fight tooth and nail to stay in New Zealand when COVID hit, as far as I could tell, they were allowed to just take that money and skedaddle. At least that seemed to be nobody's worried about getting paid back or anything like that. There is no payment for doing this, so you're kind of teaching for free, but all your expenses are covered, which has the benefit of there not being any sort of tax obligation. From the US, you can go to New Zealand for up to 3 months before you need to get a visa. To get a visa as a visitor, you basically just need to show you have enough money that you can go to New Zealand and live there on your own expenses. I believe you're allowed to be in New Zealand for up to 9 months out of every 18. So if you really want to go see the country, you could go for quite a while. It's not a real big country. One person there said it's a little bit like you kind of take Washington and Oregon and a chunk of Northern California and put it together, and you've pretty much got New Zealand, both in terms of size and in terms of kind of what a lot of the climate is like. The population just went over 5 million while I was there, so not a ton of people there. Which brings me to my final slide on good old coronavirus, which I felt obligated to put in my favorite meme. It's only quarantine if it comes from the quarantine region of France. Otherwise, it's just sparkling isolation. Here is their Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. and their health minister, Ashley Bloomfield. They were on daily during coronavirus, providing updates on number of cases and what they were doing. And one thing that was really interesting about watching that from a cultural perspective was they didn't do it perfectly. They had a pretty tight lockdown. The only place you could get food was from sort of large chain grocery stores. So all the like local butchers and things had to shut down. That caused a problem with the Islamic population because they had no place to get halal meat, so they had to fix that. But sort of the way the government worked, it was like they realized there was a mistake and they fixed it. There weren't a lot of people like yelling and screaming and jumping up and down that they had made this mistake and it was this horrible problem. It was just like, you know, oops, guess we got to fix that. And they fixed it and everybody went about their business. Grocery store lines, sometimes, depending on when you showed up, everybody nice and socially distanced. We always had toilet paper. Nobody hoarded all the toilet paper and had it disappear. So I took that picture and sent it back to folks back here. And then we got a few examples of nice New Zealanders. We had our government thing that they put all over the place. This was just a random sign out in rural New Zealand that we saw. And I could bet the people on running this farm were never in danger of coming in contact with anybody that actually had coronavirus. But that suggests, you know, they were going to buy into what the government wanted to do. Kids at home, not at school, making, you know, nice little signs and things. They had this program for entertaining sort of bored young kids where people started putting little like stuffed bears or whatever in the windows of their houses so the kids could walk around and try and find bears. This is like a digital ad sign on one of the bus stops. They even, you know, stuck a few different bears in there. When Easter rolled around, various people did sort of sidewalk Easter egg hunts where they made drawings of Easter eggs for kids to wander around and find. So it just was a real nice sort of, we're all in it together community spirit that I enjoyed being a part of. Let's see. Their stay at home was a little more severe than here. So within about a week, they had gone from just a few cases to about 100 in the country. And they shut everything down but grocery stores, which instituted safety procedures, gas stations for essential workers that needed to be able to buy gas, and pharmacy so you could get prescriptions. But that was it. There was no takeout. So really there was not a lot to do other than cook food. Getting a hold of yeast and flour was actually a little bit of a challenge. A lot of people doing baking and things. But about all you could do was cook, drink a bit of wine, teach your classes online, you know, kind of like with things here. Go for walks around your neighborhood, but you weren't allowed to, you know, drive to the beach just to, you know, do that or whatever. That was against the rules. And one of their people in the legislature actually got busted for doing that, got in quite a bit of trouble. You know, they shut down really hard for about 6 weeks, and that pretty much eliminated the presence of the virus in the country. So then they allowed takeout for a couple of weeks, and then you could start to, you know, go to restaurants with reduced capacity and that sort of thing. And for the last 5 weeks that I was there, which would have been about May 1st, came back June 11th, there weren't any restrictions at all. You could go anywhere, do anything domestically. All they did was keep the borders closed. You could only get in if you had a New Zealand passport. If you did, they put you in a government-funded hotel as a quarantine for 14 days and made sure you did not have coronavirus before they let you go wander around the country. So I guess that's the presentation. Tēnā koutou, which is their version of thank you, which was also hello, if you remembered. So ala, aloha in Hawaii, they kind of have the same thing. Let's see. I would be very happy to answer any questions that anybody has about either doing the teaching fellowship or the country of New Zealand.
Thank you very much, Stefan. And we'll have some time for if people want to talk and ask a few questions at the end here.
Sure.
Looks like there are less beautiful places to be stuck during the fun, so very nice. And I will say too that if you are since you're on the hall with us here, if you have that fixation on getting your espresso in, I do have an espresso machine in my office. You're welcome to get that fix taken care of. All right.
I have thought about getting my own, given, COVID around here. My mom and I get a latte at the local Lion drive-through every morning because she doesn't have too many things she can do other than that in the grocery store. But I will keep that in mind.
All right. Well, I'm going to.
I need to unshare.
If you will unshare, I'm
Yep.
going to share mine, and I will open up Dave's presentation, and we'll hear from him. And let me see if I can go. There we go.
Good.
Got it? All right.
All right, great. Well, you want to go back one? While Gary's doing that, I want to begin with the question. In addition to New Zealand, from a professional and personal standpoint, where would you like to go spend an extended amount of time to both study, research, teach, and basically experience the culture of? And so I'd let you think about that for a second. And so I've given you permission to daydream here, basically, while I present my presentation here. So I was a Fulbright scholar at the Management Center of Innsbruck, and that's Innsbruck, Austria, in Central Europe. The slide here is showing the Fulbright scholars from Austria. You might recognize in the middle there, Alexandra Sterling Hillenbrand was one of ours, App State, who also was there. She was in Graz. Fulbright is one of the most widely recognized and prestigious international exchange programs in the world. It was established shortly after World War II and funded by war surplus. The purpose of which was basically to build up the universities back in Asia and also in Europe after World War II, and to provide an exchange of ideas. All right, Gary, you can go to the second slide now. Beautiful. So the mission of the Fulbright Scholar is to advance knowledge, redefine teaching, and bring an international perspective and experience back to your home campus, organization, and community. That's what we're doing here. The picture here is of the apartment that I stayed in. This is in a little town called Eagles. So Innsbruck is in the Tyrol province. The province is about the size of the high country, if you will. Innsbruck, you may recognize the name because Innsbruck hosted 2 Winter Olympics back in '64 and I believe '72. And we were sitting up, Innsbruck is about 130,000 people in this gorgeous valley that's about 5 miles wide and 100 miles long. And it has this plateaus on both sides. So Eagles was a little ski resort, if you will, that's at about 5 miles from downtown Innsbruck or Old Town Innsbruck. And we lived there in this apartment, and we were about a half a mile from the Olympic ski slopes, if you will, there, Paskerfeld. Immersion in culture is a big part of the Fulbright experience. As Stefan mentioned, they want you to experience as much of the culture as possible. And that was widely disseminated, both in the literature and also in the orientation, and everywhere you went or everything you saw and did with Fulbright, they talked about that. There's roughly 800 scholars and administrators go on become Fulbright scholars in 130 different countries. And that's out of about 1.5 million faculty members here. All right, Gary. So for the process of the Fulbright, you need to plan ahead. So for me, it took me about 3 years of thinking about this seriously, because Kind of what prompted it was a discussion I had with a former colleague of mine, Betty Coffey, over in the College of Business in our department, talked about it about a dozen years ago. She went on one to China, and that kind of prompted me thinking about it. So I would encourage you to visit the Fulbright Scholar website, which I've provided here. It has multiple layers. Basically, you can search by region of the world. Then you can go down by country, etc. You should visit the host country's website, which is separate from the overall Fulbright Scholar website. I mention or highlight the word scholar here because if you Google or do an internet search of Fulbright, most likely it's going to come up Fulbright student website, which is totally different. So you need to know that up front. App State also has usually a week-long forum on Fulbrights. Usually it's in February. You should definitely attend those. I think the first one is on finance, and then they bring in guest speakers and former Fulbrighters. You should speak with Fulbright alums. I know I spoke with a gentleman in our App State Physics department who went to MCI, Management Center of Innsbruck, where I did mine, and he gave some great insight about the process, about the, and then once I was accepted, about the area and region and what to expect. You should look for fit, is what I think, in selecting where you want to go. For me, I had an interest in both teaching and research. And so I was looking at this from a fit standpoint. But you should also put in to your calculus, where does this fit in with your life and what you want to do and where are you in what stage of life? And it's going to vary by person, by their family situation, et cetera. So give serious thought about that. I'll talk more about that later. You should give thought to research interests. My interests are in studying various regions, what we call biopharmaceutical innovation ecosystems. That just means regions like the research triangle here and how they developed. So that was my research interest, and there are many areas I could have gone to, but Central Europe, I chose that because there had multiple innovation ecosystems there. Teaching area, you should look for your discipline. So if you go to the Fulbright Scholar website, they'll have basically a region, break down to a country, that will break down to an individual academy. And then from there, they'll have a bullet point, usually 6 to 8 disciplines that they're looking for. And then I was fortunate in that MCI had, in addition to that, they had preference for healthcare management. And so that kind of fed onto, okay, this sounds like I'm going to have a pretty good shot, as opposed to competing with people from business or nutrition or sports medicine or whatever, because they were looking for somebody to teach this in particular. So what you should know about the Fulbright is there's different types of Fulbrights. There's a strictly research one. And in 2018, about 28% of all the 800 people who went did strictly research, 100% research. There's a teaching and research one, which was the largest bucket, about 38% in 2018 worldwide did teaching, combination of teaching and research. There's a strictly teaching one. And then there's some administrator seminars and a postdoctoral research. And so this is just to kind of gives you a breakdown of what they are. Most of the ones in Austria are teaching and research. And again, it's going to vary by country. You should contact the host institution, both their international office. Typically, it's the international office that's going to be the link, the contact person at a given organization. And then you should also contact the department. I sent my CV into the department or excuse me, to the international individual, the contact person. Within 2 days, I got an email back that said, we have an interest. Would you be willing to do a Skype interview? So I did a Skype interview with that individual plus someone from the department. And obviously it went well. And so you want to do that. Also, you want to think about getting maybe an OIED grant to visit that, whatever that host institution. I believe Alexandra Hillenbrand did that. And so you may want to consider doing that. That's a good way if both parties kind of are uncertain as to, is this a good fit? What are you really trying to get out? In the application, it will say whether a letter of invitation is required or not, whether it's preferred. I would tell you to get the letter of invitation regardless. And that letter will most likely come from the department that you're ultimately going to work with. I've heard people say that if you didn't have a letter of invitation, even if it said not required, that you were kind of dead in the water. I don't know if that's true or not. I just think it really adds something to your application if you had that. I also looked at going to Ireland because of my research, and I had a letter of invitation from Ireland as well, but that's a different story. You should get the college and the university reimbursement people involved early on. You'll meet with them on multiple occasions as you progress through this. If you're going to do research and involve human subjects, you need to go get IRB approval. And that approval can be either here and or there. And for me, it was just, they just wanted to see that I had it from here. And then you can seek additional funding from the OIED, the Board of Trustees, the department, except your department, et cetera. I had some additional OIED funds as well. All right, Gary. So the application process, it's subject to change. However, it didn't change too much from the ones in the past that I reviewed. Basically, they're looking for a 5-page project statement, kind of a who, what, where, why, what you're going to do, and you can see all the categories. I initially wrote it as with only a handful of categories, and the reviewers, internal reviewers here at App State said you should break it up a little bit more. After that, I got a couple of individuals who had applied before successfully and looked at their application and broke it up and kind of followed that. That was good. They also want to see an abbreviated curriculum vitae, 2 or 3 page curriculum vitae, I believe is what they're looking for. So obviously you're going to focus on what you've done in the past, how it meets what you're going to do in the future. They want to see 2 examples of shortened syllabi for those who are going to teach. Again, the letters of invitation, and then 3 references they want to see. So I had my department chair who could speak to teaching. I had Betty Coffey, who also could speak to teaching, as we used to work together in the management department, and she could also speak to research as we do research together. And then also I had a gentleman, Jack Duncan, who was one of my dissertation co-chairs. And Jack was actually a chair Fulbrighter, and also for 10 years sat on the committee that looked at all of the management Fulbright applications here in the US. And so I felt like he was a good fit for me. And he was basically a mentor of mine. All right. So the time frame for the Fulbright process, typically you submit it in August via electronic. This year it's due to COVID. I believe was pushed back to September. What it'll be in the future, I don't know. As I said, it's reviewed in the fall, typically November, here in the US by US Fulbright personnel. I believe they do a background check on you and other things, seeing if your application's complete. They also have a committee of Fulbright scholars based on your discipline that will review it. You'll receive typically in December interim notification whether or not you made that first hurdle. Then it will be reviewed in the host country by the country's personnel. So Fulbright Austria has a team of about 15 individuals that work there in Vienna. And then also the host institution gets a final say on it as well. And then usually in February, although I received mine January 31st, you'll get either an acceptance or a decline letter. And then you have 20 to 30 days to respond in the affirmative if you want to go or decline it. And then after that, it's all subject to medical clearance. So you do the history, physical, and a whole bunch of other things, vaccines, et cetera. And then again, you'll have to go to Washington, DC to get a visa D. And for anybody interested, I'll be happy to talk about that. That's a lot of work associated with that. All right, Gary. So talking a little bit about the financials, the various grants basically vary by where you're going and which type you're getting. Typically the chair position pays the most. One of the things I would say about the chair position in Austria is the research. One of the things the Fulbright people here said is don't be afraid to apply for a chair position. And kind of in retrospect, I think I would have been competitive for a chair position based on certain things that I saw there. It's going to vary. The amount they pay you will vary by length of time. Teaching positions will pay more. Teaching research positions will pay more as well. Be sure to find out how they prorate the grant. They'll sometimes say we'll pay X amount of dollars on a year prorated. You want to know, is that 3 months or 4 months that they're going to prorate it? You also want to know, basically, do they consider do they consider it 3 semesters or 2 semesters, how they're going to prorate it? So Ireland, for example, said, we're going to pay you on a prorated amount, but it's only 3 months. And so that became problematic. All right. You should find out what also is included. It will say in the description, but you should probably speak to the international officer at the host institution to find out exactly what it's going to pay. Some pay housing, sometimes it doesn't. Some will pay travel, some won't, etc. Host will pay in the host currency, Austria, that's euros. The exchange rate, of course, goes up and down. App State will repeatedly tell you that they don't give tax advice. And so you should be aware of that, of how your reimbursement is taxed or not taxed. How it worked for me, the funds, I set up immediately, kind of like Stefan. Immediately, the first thing they want you to do is set up a bank account. And so Fulbright Austria paid me. I sent it on to ASU and then submitted reimbursement documents. Typically for Fulbrights, I believe, at least in this college, ASU will deduct pay for adjuncts, et cetera, although I understand in other colleges, they didn't do that. I don't know if that's true or not. That was just something somebody told me. And so reimbursement levels and other things will change. And then I give my example down at the bottom of how that works. Because of COVID, Fulbright Austria also kicked in another $1,000 related both to supplemental health insurance and also travel back to the US. Okay, Gary. So where did I go? I went to the Management Center of Innsbruck. It was a teaching and research type of arrangement. The Austrians did something interesting in that they, like the Germans, kind of split off their applied disciplines into new universities. So the Management Center of Innsbruck is a small university about the size of the College of Health Sciences here at App State, with about 3,500 students. And they've taken biotech, business, engineering, healthcare management, nutrition, and other applied fields and separated it into this college, still affiliated with the University of Innsbruck, but it's kind of a spinoff, if you will. You can see I was in the Department of Nonprofit, Social, and Healthcare Management, and they had 3 different basic degrees at the undergraduate level. They also had a Master's of International Health and Social Management, and they also had a Master's of European Health Economics and Management. And that was something unique. It was the first of its kind in Europe, where it was basically a joint venture between 4 different universities in 4 different countries. And so that was kind of interesting. Their bachelor's degree is very portfolio oriented, and their master's degree is very research oriented, which is very different than what the method that we teach here in the US. All right, Gary. So I had some initial plans that were set out that basically involved teaching, business strategy to international students, to 15 international students from Argentina, Brazil, Hong Kong, Singapore, Germany, Poland, Spain, Italy. And then at both the undergraduate and master's level, they were MBA students and undergraduates in industrial engineering, which was kind of interesting. And then I taught healthcare innovation management to undergraduate healthcare management majors that were primarily from Austria, but also a couple from Germany. And all that was designed to be face-to-face. And then I was going to go do some research. All right, go ahead. So COVID hit. It hit relatively early. Austria had one of the earliest lockdowns and the strictest lockdown in all of Europe. As you can kind of see here, on March 10th, the day before I was supposed to teach, they moved to online. Fortunately for me, I had made video lectures of every single lecture that I was going to do, because I knew that English was going to be a secondary language to these individuals. So I just went ahead and said, okay, I'll do it. And you can, thinking that they could use it, but so I did that. So I was ready for that. Tyrol province, which is where Innsbruck locked down on the 15th, et cetera. And then a lot of basically Fulbright Austria ended officially on April 5th. And so Gary, if you want to go to the next slide. So the lockdown was strict, if you will. In the Tyrol province, which is Innsbruck, you could only do a few things. You could go to the grocery, you could go to the bank, you could go to the post office. The airport shut down, which meant the car rental place shut down. There were no taxis, trains, buses. You could not leave the province. So the province is like the high country again. You couldn't leave that. You really couldn't leave your municipality there. And they had police at all the borders, all the Tyrolean borders. So you couldn't leave. So coming back was not really an option. There was another individual who was doing a Fulbright at MCI, and we were like, they want us to come back, but we can't come back. How can we get there? So anyways, so that was that. They allowed us to exercise, if you will, within the municipality on March 20th, and then outside the municipality, meaning in the high country, basically in the province, and rental cars came open. And so we started doing rental cars. And so basically the teaching was 2 3-week modules or 6 weeks overall. And it was basically, so during the lockdown, I was teaching most of that time, if you will. And you can see some of the other areas that things such as when the restaurants opened and hotels opened, et cetera. Okay. So we tried to make the best of a bad situation. As I said, I taught these couple of online courses in healthcare innovation management and business strategies. They invited me back to teach, perhaps. They also talked about opportunities to partner with App State and specifically the college that I was in. But as you may know, Europe is having a second wave. Austria, the wave now is worse. The second wave is worse than the first wave. And so probably that's going to be after Austria. In addition, I oversaw 3 master's level students, their thesis. 2 of them, the second reader said were almost PhD level. And I had a lot of fun. They were from, 2 of them were from Belgium and 1 was from the UK. And they were all on healthcare management topics and it was great. I learned a lot and enjoyed that. The administration, I watched that a good bit and talked to the program director, very much an outsourced program. And the culture, I saw the culture of Austria, Germany, Italy, and Switzerland, because as you've seen with some of these pictures, we were able to get out. And so the last 3 weeks of the Italy opened up, Switzerland opened up, and so we were able to get out on the Williams dime, if you will, and go visit several places and try to make the most of experiencing culture that we could. All right, Gary. As I said, I went there. This was a teaching research. Kind of initially, I had planned to go interview trade association people in the biopharma industry in various locations because everything was closed. So what does that mean? That means from Innsbruck, the border to Italy was 30 minutes away, an hour away to Germany, 2 hours away to Switzerland, and all of these have major hubs. And I was going to interview those individuals, and when on return, I was going to send out a survey to these individuals and a bunch of other individuals in academics, in biotech firms, pharmacy firms, CROs, CMOs, et cetera. And so I switched gears and did a survey, sent out a survey while I was there, looked up 600 individuals associated with various areas, got about 102 surveys back, which isn't great, but given the situation, not bad. And so I think I'm pretty good on that. Just prior to leaving, top journal in the field, Drug Discovery Today, asked me to write a paper. So I'm going to use some of the survey results on that, and which I'm working on right now. All right, Gary. And just to bore you, this is just a look at some of the preliminary results, which just kind of basically creates a taxonomy in various ways of the various regions, meaning how does the regions in Milan differ from the region in Basel, differ from Vienna, differ from Innsbruck, differ from Munich. And so I've been in conversations with a number of industry individuals in Switzerland and also Austria to kind of build upon this as well. Okay, Gary, this is kind of boring. Just some final takeaways. Practice what you preach. Resiliency and persistence, big time. We teach that in healthcare management to our students. definitely needed it during the lockdown there. There was a lot of lack of response, both during, before, from many people. And so you got to kind of grunt and bear through that. The whole thing's going to take longer than it should. More people will be involved than you kind of think necessary. Budget for out-of-pocket cost, I think Stefan could probably agree with that. Cultural experience is a huge part of the Fulbright. Go early if you can. Understand if you're there to teach, you're basically there to help, and be flexible with that. And then finally, kind of understand that after you get back, it's going to take a while to get your life back. And so I'm still dealing with trying to do things that basically to get my life back in order. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Gary. Mute.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate you doing that. And it sounds like you've got it set up to where an associate dean might be able to go there in the future too. I appreciate that. So we're pushing the time, but does anybody have any burning question? We can follow up with you guys one-on-one and get some more, but.
I just want to say thank you to both of you for the presentations. It's really exciting. And I do have 2 associate deans, I think, that could both apply to some of these things if they wanted to. I could not. I'm not doing much research, but I would love to go visit the places where you are. And thank you so much for your presentations. It was quite inspiring.
Erskine is just teaching.
Oh, okay. Maybe I could do that.
No research obligation there.
I had one
Very
question.
much. Appreciate it. Jessica, go ahead.
Oh, I just had one question. I was just curious as far as the teaching component, other than the changes that you made related to COVID, were there any differences in teaching in the country that you went to versus the US? And I thought a lot of other faculty might be interested in that, if you want to briefly mention if there were any differences.
That's true. That's a good point. I didn't feel like New Zealand was very different. I think they have a little more similar to an American model of how they do things. There are some small differences, but overall, I didn't feel like there were big differences. I was impressed by the students. They were engaged, asked good questions, that sort of thing. So yeah, the only differences I can think of were like they take almost a month at Easter in the middle of the semester, so spring break plus. Unfortunately, that happened, with lockdown, so it wasn't that much of a benefit. But in other semesters, that's a nice gap in the middle you could use to do some touring around the country and that sort of thing.
I would say the Austrians, and this is the undergraduates, like the Austrians in general, are very reserved. I mean, they made me appear like Meg Barth, an extrovert. I mean, they were extremely polite, just very, I don't know how to say it. I mean, asked very few questions, etc. The kind of the international class I taught, all of them were extremely outgoing, and were there. I mean, they were, I hate to say this, they really got the short end of it, because most of them had just arrived that Sunday and I began teaching Tuesday, and we locked down. I mean, they locked down, they arrived Sunday, locked down Monday, Tuesday, boom. So.
Thank you very much.
Very different across the board.
It is
very much.
a good question, and just in general. So I was lucky enough to do a Fulbright as well before I came to App, but that was to Wales in the UK. So in both cases, I went to English-speaking countries,
Yes.
and it was still pretty shocking. The I don't know what you call it, the culture shock when you get there. Just little differences that you don't think of, and how foreign stuff can feel. Even in what you might think would be about as familiar as you could get with a British heritage sort of country. So that's something to be prepared for that I didn't really think to mention in my presentation.
The vast majority of people in Austria speak English as a second language. Once the lockdown occurred, they all spoke German, and it was kind of interesting. And then unfortunately, the grocery store, the little Spar, was owned by Slovakians, and they didn't speak English. And so that was kind of interesting. So I asked one day for cream for my wife's coffee, and they handed me sour cream, you know, that kind of stuff. It was fun. Learning experience.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
thank you.
Sounds like great experiences, and thank you for sharing them. So, all right. Y'all have a good rest of the day.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you
you
for
very
organizing,
much.
Carrie.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And yeah, I'll think about, you should all think about International Week next week. There'll be more presentations about lots of stuff.
Yes. Thanks for the
Great.
reminder.
Bye now.